Hello, and you're very welcome to the week that really was with John McGurk and Sarah Ryan. It is the 11th of May, 2023, and it has been a week that has been chock full of nonsense. I say that because I was surprised to learn this morning when I opened the pages of my Irish Times that Sarah Ryan, who I have known for many years, listeners, and who is a dear friend of mine, I was surprised, Sarah, to learn that you're a racist. Uh, because
Oh, you're
I'm not spilling any of your beauty secrets when I say because I've been in your company and like a lot of Irish women, I think from time to time you've worn fake tan. You bigot.
from time to time I have, and I'm culturally appropriating people and hurting people's feelings and all of that type of nonsense that we have to deal with. And it was a new low, John. I think
Well,
they're just trolling us now. I
well,
think it's a joke.
for those who don't know what we're talking about, because there'll be some very sensible people out there who don't read the Irish Times and do listen to this podcast who won't know that the number two story on the Irish Times website today is an opinion article by a lady called Adriana Acosta Cortez. I hope I pronounced that correctly. I think I have. Which
It's
says
beautiful.
Irish women's obsession with fake tan is problematic. When a white Irish woman dons fake tan for a night out, she says, she's wearing a costume that allows her to experience a fleeting taste of a more exotic identity with none of the obstacles people of color face. The article goes on to say that this raises questions of cultural appropriation and fetishization of high melanin content found in more pigmented people, and that those who are wearing it are not making just an innocuous cosmetic choice. He says that when you're wearing fake tan, you're not acknowledging the struggles faced by those who naturally possess it in this case being a tan. How do you answer those charges, Sarah? I mean, it seems to me you're guilty as Beck. Like I've never heard you once say
Uh,
when wearing fake tan. I've never heard you once say to me that you wish to acknowledge the struggles faced by those who are naturally tanned. Never once.
Oh God, this is so dumb. Hang on, the dumb. No, first of all, I actually think I'm going to do the old reverse the roux on this and say that this is actually kind of discriminatory or racist against Irish people because not all of us are ginger, white-skinned, burny people. Loads of Irish people tan naturally. So if they tan naturally on the, 2 weeks where we all go mental when it goes sunny and wear no sun cream, are they, if they're melanin advantaged in that way, are they not really Irish? What a load. Like, I mean, I saw somebody tweet earlier on, John, and I'm inclined to agree. This country is in bad need of a good old recession because people need something to be worrying about. Because if you literally invent the story in your mind that fake tan is racist when you live in Ireland, you have no problems whatsoever and are coming up with things to be upset about. And someone in the Irish Times editorial or signing off on this is having a laugh and taking the piss out of you because you're purposely or not you're trolling us because Ireland is like the biggest consumer of fake tan. I'm pretty sure per capita in the world.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I think like we buy like 60% of fake tan. Certainly the pennies fake tan anyway. Um, we in my casual observation, we're getting better and better at it. Because we used to be fairly tangoed a number of years ago. But at the same time, like at the end of the day, like who cares? Because and I just find, and I hate to say this because I've said before on this podcast that I I'm very close to my mother, but we have a number of different opinions on different things. And my mum is a, hardcore feminist, pro-choice type of person, and I'm not. But I've really noticed that all of these kind of things that we're now expected to drop and shed and accept and let go of, they always seem to be like anti-women. So like I don't know that many men who wear fake tan. I'm sure there are some, but there's not a lot of them. And it's just like constantly, if like only a matter of a year or two ago, it was trust women, listen to women, accept what women want to wear, want to be, want to say, whatever. And now it's just like, shut up, don't wear your tan, accept girl dick in your changing rooms and just take it like and don't complain about it. like accept that your sports are now that the women's cycling is being won by the first place is an hour ahead of the second place, and just accept all of this and shut up and drop your fake tan and don't say this and don't complain and just shut up. And I'm starting to think that I might just become more of an ardent feminist myself because I'm just getting a bit tired of being told all the time what I should and shouldn't be comfortable with, and now what I should and shouldn't be wearing. If I want to wear fake tan, well, frankly, piss off.
I agree. And I also want to say, like,
You're
this
scared. You're scared not to. You're scared not to.
well, no, but like, for me, look, here's the thing. This is lunacy, but it's a particular form of lunacy. It's high status lunacy. It's the kind of lunacy that marks you out in the eyes of some idiots as being sort of a smart, intelligent, progressive person. It's not that far off. Saying fake tan is racist ain't that far off saying Charles III is a lizard dressed in a man's suit. It's just that one lunatic opinion is sort of the low status opinion of conspiracy theorists, and the other lunatic opinion is the kind of thing you can repeat over lunch to one of the ladies in the UCD Women's Studies department. And these people are tyrants. As you said, a couple of years ago, it was don't braid your hair. That is cultural appropriation. Don't wear the wrong costume to Halloween party. That is cultural appropriation, which is it's a fancy word for kind of racism, really, cultural appropriation.
Yeah,
Now
but you notice the way it's always women. This is the thing. Like braid your hair. Like, and this is the thing that's starting to really get on my nerves. It's like all of the things that we're supposed to be dropping seem to be women focused. And this woman writing this article thinks that she's a protected class because she is, in her own words, Latinx. I don't even know what that means, but fine, Latinx.
Walk into a Hispanic community in America somewhere and call them Latinx, and they look at you like you've two heads.
She's Latin. I don't understand what the X means, but whatever. Anyway, but the point is that I'm I'm just getting a bit tired, and it's like a couple of weeks ago. Like, if I have questions about what's being taught to my kids in school about gender ideology, if asking questions about that makes me a transphobic, well then I'm transphobic. And if wearing fake tan makes me racist, well then I'm racist. Like, calling us names all the time and trying to tell us what to do and what to be is just, not only is it wearing thin, but like, fine. Those words are just not scary anymore. And that's a really big problem, because then real racists are actually just going to be hiding in plain sight. Do you know what I mean? If you call people racists for wearing fake tan, well then you're diminishing the value of the word, so much so that it's just, the whole thing is becoming comedic and farcical.
I want to come back to a point you made there a moment ago about how this disproportionately hits women, because this is it's just a thought entirely out of left field, but it reminds me of a conversation I was having this week with somebody about, of all things, pornography. Now, I don't regularly have conversations about pornography, but it was in the context. I don't compare notes, but it was in the context of the U.S. states of Utah and Louisiana have put huge restrictions on Pornhub, and the other person was saying this is brilliant news, you should ban it all, etc., etc. And the point they made to me, I thought was a really good one, which was that in the society that we had, the society that we came from, the conservative, repressive, restrictive society, the expectation in terms of male-female interaction was basically that men would cut their cloth to measure women's desires. In other words, you'd be well behaved, you'd try and be monogamous, you'd be a gentleman, and all the rest of it. Whereas we've transitioned into a society post the sexual revolution where women are expected to conform to male desire all the time. So now this is in the context of an article in the Times this week where a woman had written about how she'd watched some of the stuff on one of these websites, and it was all choking and spitting and all sorts of really unpleasant stuff that most women, I think, wouldn't be naturally fans of. But it's all anti-women. And I think bringing all of that together from what you're talking about how women are constantly being lectured, to the sort of sexual marketplace that we now exist in, where kind of like there are expectations there among young women which weren't there in the past, to everything else we talk about in this podcast, is it any wonder that you've got an epidemic of young girls in America and increasingly here saying, well, I don't want to be a woman anymore. I want to be something else. I mean, it's all tied together, this cultural shift, which I think I'm not a woman. I'm glad I'm not a woman, not because I have anything against women, because I don't know how women put up with it. The expectations that are put on them. And you add into that You add into that, by the way, the expectations that you don't have a family until you're 40. Companies get you to freeze your eggs. You're expected to be a career woman. You're expected to be a mother. You're expected to have it all. Whereas, like, if you're a bloke these days in this feminine-led society that you apparently have, you get to sit on the couch, watch football, and maybe you're expected to wash the dishes
Yeah.
once in a blue moon. It's
And when you do, everyone will talk about how wonderful and progressive you are.
and rightly so. I washed the dishes this week, and I was waiting for praise that didn't come. But anyway,
Good.
my wife is going to totally text you in the next few days, going, "He did not wash the fucking dishes." But anyway. Plus, the point I'm making, jokes aside, is I think an important one, which is that our society, like this progressive society that's supposed to be feminist led, is so relentlessly anti-woman in
Yeah.
just so many ways. Um,
That's my point, is that I always thought that my mum was kind of like, not stuck in the dark ages, but I thought like, oh, you're talking about something that's no longer relevant to me, that I'm now, I don't feel like I was treated differently than my brother. I don't think any opportunities were afforded to my brother that weren't afforded to me, and blah 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 blah. And I thought that the women's thing was not over, but like that massive inroads had been made, and it wasn't really something that was really affecting me in any way. And now I think that, like, now that I have two sons and a daughter, I'm starting to think, well, maybe now there is like a need to start speaking up, because everywhere I look, it's that women are, we made inroads on like trust women and believe women and whatever. And now it's, well, I don't care about your discomfort in changing rooms, or your discomfort here or where a biological man's feelings is more important than your level of discomfort. And I don't care if you've trained in swimming or in cycling or whatever it is for 10 years. Now it's more important that a biological male is made feel comfortable in this sport. And I don't care if you feel like you want to dress a certain way or wear fake tan. Somebody from who has naturally darker skin than you is offended, and their feelings are more important than the way you feel about it, and so on and so on and so on. And it's just getting a bit, hold on a second here. Like, I don't see these I don't see all of our, liberal, progressive strides that we're making having such impact on the day-to-day lives in a negative way of men.
yeah, yep, it's very good. Anyway, somebody else who had a rough week. By the way, actually, no, before we move on, did you see? Speaking of all you just said, that the Dublin Marathon is going to have a non-binary category in it this year. This is
So how does that actually work then? Will any biological females enter then?
I have
Or
no,
will they just run in there?
but they won't win.
Yeah. Well, we know. So will it just become
A second category for blokes in dresses,
yeah.
possibly. I mean, it's bizarre. I mean, obviously there are different categories in all kinds of sports. The disabled category, there's maybe an older category, there are youth categories, but they're all based on ability. This is the only category in our an Irish sporting event that I'm aware of which is based on feeling, which is that, oh, I don't feel like a man or a woman, therefore I'm non-binary, therefore I get my own category in a race. Come off it. Come off it. I
Yeah,
mean,
but at least
can I enter the over 65s because, like, I'm not that fit, and some website somewhere said I had the physical age of a 70-year-old. It didn't, but theoretically.
yeah, I
Yeah,
think I think you should.
is that something that you can do? I mean, can I
Well,
enter the seniors golfing thing in my local golf club? It's just such. I'm nearly
but
very.
it's better than nothing, John, because it's what it is it's an acknowledgement. If you think about it, like, if you want to be positive about it, like, was it last week or the week before that cycling tournament was won by a biological man an hour ahead of the
But
second
say,
place?
no, you're
1 hour.
misunderstanding it. This isn't for women. And I mean, under Irish law, women are women, right? So a trans woman is a woman. So if you're a man who's officially a trans woman, you're in the woman's category. So don't misunderstand this. This is a non-binary category for people who, like, don't know what gender they are and may sit on the fence. Might be something one day,
Uh,
another the other day. So no, this ain't a
oh,
special.
I totally misunderstood.
You thought
Oh
this
my
was a
God,
special. You
there's
thought
still there's still a there's still a little shred of hope inside of me that thought that was something. Oh God,
no,
that's so depressing. I thought, oh
no.
no. Do you understand what I thought it was?
I no
And it
understand
isn't
it.
that at all.
I thought you
It
thought. I
isn't
think
that
you
at
thought it was
all.
a special category for
I
people who are transgender, who have their
I
own
did.
Yeah,
I did. Oh,
no,
God love me, I did.
it ain't that. No, that would be
No, it's not that at all.
that would be discrimination. That'd be saying that they're a separate category of women different to you, which
I
of course
just
under
thought, I
Irish
was
law they
like,
are not.
that's so, how cute for me that just there for a minute, there was still a
Oh,
little part
darling.
of me.
We thought we were still back in the
Oh,
sane old days of
oh, oh.
2017-ish. Yeah. Yeah.
I
Well,
was like, what a positive move. No, it's not.
no, no,
Oh,
no. So I mean, there you go.
well,
So yeah, non-binary, which brings
but
us
then
on.
who'd be in, but then surely there will only be like, there's not that many people who what's the amount of people who identify as non-binary who are also interested in running in a marathon? Surely it's very small.
You would
No?
think that. You would think that. But I mean, you know, is this really about recognizing non-binary people in a marathon, or is it about the marathon putting out a statement that gets people on Twitter to go, "Oh, amazing progressive move"? I'm not sure. I'm not sure. Anyway, to the
I
point.
am sure that it is that.
Um, well, we will keep an eye on it and see who wins. I suspect the person who does win would be the owner of Meat and Two Veg rather than any other biological configuration. But there'll be a special kind of class of non-binary male runner who gets their own category. But that's the country we live in. And speaking of the country we live in, actually, I was going to talk about Senator Eileen Flynn's taxi uh, incident, but we move on for a moment because it's on the same topic of the non-binary thing to Michael McDowell's objection to the hate speech bill this week because that was really interesting. Did you read his letter?
I did. I love when really smart people get involved in politics.
Yeah,
So rare.
I mean,
No,
I
I read his letter and it's great because he's so clever and he's just like he's just going at it with this kind of like razor sharp focus on the really important, the importance of specifics in law and being precise about language. And the reality of it is that it underneath that level of scrutiny, the bill just doesn't hold up on a number of fronts, specifically on the definition of gender. But
so
you're more up to date than me in the
yeah,
response.
and just so the listeners know what we're talking about, because I think that's important because there will be people who haven't read his letter. The basic point that Senator McDowell is making is that the bill protects gender identity as a so-called protected characteristic in inverted commas, which is to say that if somebody insults your gender identity in a hateful way, they can be prosecuted. It's hate speech. But problem is that Michael McDowell is making the point that in Irish law there are only two gender identities, male and female. And that is true even for people who are transgender or get a gender recognition cert. If you are a man who gets a gender recognition cert, you become legally female and vice versa. So there are actually only two recognized gender identities. So the hate speech bill, says Michael McDowell, is protecting a characteristic that the Irish government doesn't recognize anywhere else in law. So how can it be criminal to say that other gender to criticize or critique something that doesn't officially exist? That is the position of. Do you know what Simon Harris's answer was?
No, tell me.
His answer was that they were future proofing the bill. So basically, what he was saying was that there may in time be other gender identities other than male or female recognized in Irish law. And when that time came, they wouldn't have to go back and amend the hate speech bill because it would already have protected that characteristic. So I mean, if you take Simon Harris literally, at some point we are going to be inventing new genders and putting them into Irish law.
All right. Well, that's just a nice way of saying we're making this up as we go along, isn't it, Jen?
It's a nice way of saying the lunatics are running fucking silent. Sorry, pardon my language, but like that's what's happening. I mean, it's bizarre to live in a country where there is a significant cohort of people who are, and I don't not want to say in power because I don't think they're in power, but they're like reporting on the news or involved in the process who are absolutely wackadoodle. And so we're in this position where we haven't actually yet invented new genders, but criticizing those new genders is a crime. That's the that's the situation we're in. And I think there's a preponderance of people in the country who either don't understand it, don't care about it, just tune it out, think it's mad, think it won't affect them. I'm sure the price of the pumps is coming down, so move on. But I mean, if you really did spend a lot of time thinking about this stuff, you would assume the country had been taken over by the inmates of Bedlam, circa
But it,
1873.
but John, it doesn't matter until it matters, if you know what I mean. Like we've had conversations on this podcast before about, for example, people getting, and most of the time quite rightfully so, annoyed about like decisions, for example, that Martin Nolan has made, vis-a-vis sentencing on certain things and whatever. And so when you start changing the law and introducing a bill like this, or law, the laws that will follow will ultimately end up with people being horrified by what they look like in practice. So,
Mm-hmm.
for example, I saw a video this week um, of a Starbucks employee throwing a woman out of a Starbucks for misgendering. Did you see that? It was
Yes, I did.
Starbucks had to fire the employees, whatever. So let's pretend we take that scenario, for example, right? In theory, that woman who was, not maliciously doing anything, whatever, could be prosecuted under hate speech law for misgendering a person. Okay. And if that person is a file is sent to the DPP, blah, 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 and that person finds themselves in court being charged with that offence, that it won't be the feeling of the people. It'll be whether or not the case is made that they technically have committed this act. Do you understand? So,
Mm-hmm.
like, that person, then all of a sudden everyone will go, "Oh, it's terrible, Joe. The Mary from down the street who doesn't understand any of this pronoun stuff. She's being arrested and now she's going to jail, and oh, it's all terrible." And but it'll be too late. Like
Yeah.
that'll be the law. Do you
It
know what
will.
I mean? And so it doesn't matter. It's all fine and well, and it doesn't affect them. But the thing is that like the reason why people are so against this, who understand law or who are watching it from outside of Ireland or whatever, is because they see the path to where it gets to that, and then it's too late.
Mm-hmm.
And it's really important that speech like not be criminalized like that. And I don't think, by the way, there's anything that can be done about this now. I think this is just happening.
Yeah.
But
It
you
is. Yeah.
know, like the reality, that this in practice will mean that like victim complex people who are dying to be offended will be now armed with the full force of the law behind them for their various nonsense hurt feeling. Like we're not talking about proper abuse or anything like that. We're talking about, like, I saw a thing a couple of years ago where a woman was on a TV show with Katie Hopkins from the UK. Katie Hopkins was talking about her being fat, and this woman went out and rang the police
Mm-hmm.
because Katie Hopkins had called her fat. And it's like that kind of mentality of, I'm a victim, you've hurt my feelings, the law is behind me, whatever. It's going to turn into complete farce, but it'll be law, so it'll be too late. And
And it's not just
I
law.
don't know.
It's not just law because as you're saying that, I was thinking the other thing about nonsense like the non-binary marathon category is that it's legitimization. So, for example, if you're
Yeah.
sitting at home and you're thinking, "Oh, I don't care if the lunatics have a ridiculous category in the marathon in Dublin. I really don't care. It's bullshit. I'm tuning it out," which I don't blame you for doing. I do not blame. Nothing you can do about it. Yeah, I don't blame you for tuning it out, but recognize that that is an act of legitimization. So that if there's a non-binary category in the marathon in Dublin, and then somebody goes into your kid's classroom and starts saying, "Well, what is a non-binary person? Might you be non-binary? What are the signs of being non-binary? Have you ever felt like a boy?" And you object to that, it's too late at that stage. But we already have
Yeah.
the legitimization of this stuff at a national level. It's being legitimized to the point where the power of individual parents and families to opt out of it and to say, "No, let them off with their mad crap," that is being constantly eroded all of the time, deliberately and culturally eroded all of the time. And it's not a coincidence. I'm not saying it's some kind of global, I'm not going into the realms of one world government conspiracy theory stuff. But there's an agenda by activists who are pushing this stuff to make it irresistible culturally and irresistible by force of law. It is. I made the allegory before to the Reformation in England. It is like that. It is a desire to remake the country in their image and to make adhering to the older ways of thinking borderline criminal, and definitely too terrifying to do in public.
Yeah. I mean, and you never will. You'll be terrified. You'll be terrified of being, charges being brought up. And people will gleefully bring charges against people like you or me. Do you know what I mean? Like, because it suits them.
Yeah, but
You'll have to rethink what you can say on a podcast like this. You'll just like.
well, I won't. I won't. I mean, I'm sorry. I mean, I take your point. You're entirely correct, but I won't. I don't care. Prosecute me, send me to jail, whatever. If I see a bloke in a dress, I will say that's a bloke in a dress. That's just what you are. I mean, I mean, you cannot at some point, like, somebody like me.
You're going to be the next Enoch. You're going to be hardcore. You're going to be in jail.
Well, unlike Enoch, I'm probably hire a lawyer. But the thing is, the thing is, the thing is that it's not as if I'm not pretending I'm not going to be some martyr or change the course of history or anything. But like at a small individual level, at some point you have to say enough. And this is my red line. I'm going to completely ignore the existence of this law. I will say what I think. If that is not hateful, I'm not going to go out of my way to break any laws. That's absolutely clear. But nor would I just absolutely. There will be nothing I won't write or say after this law is passed. That's the one rule I'm setting for myself. If it leads to some clown putting in a complaint to the Gardaí, let them put in the complaint. If the state wants to throw me in jail for saying something that I've been saying for years, I'll let them do it. That's just my personal position on it. And hopefully it won't come to that.
But does your gut tell you though that the guards will get so many of these things that they'll just kind of ignore half of them, or do you think they'll actually follow through?
I mean, well, they've more time to investigate these things now, Sarah, because they won't be chasing as many criminals after what happened this week.
Ooh, that's a nice segue.
We'll come to it in a second. But my gut says that they probably the average country Garda in a Garda station, I think, probably thinks this is as nonsensical as we do. But they won't be involved. I think there'll be a specialist unit somewhere set up in Garda headquarters to investigate speech and hate and crack down on incitement and all those. That's what they do in the UK. There's special units that investigate these things. I don't think it'll be your local Garda taking time off from you eating his ham sandwich at lunchtime to go and talk to you about your tweet. But I do think I do think there will be a unit dedicated to investigating this stuff. And I think that unit will be filled with zealots. That's my fear. Every organization has them. There'll definitely be people in the Gardaí gagging to get into that unit. Definitely.
But you're also talking about introducing this law in a climate where there's a huge cohort of people who think that their hurt feelings are the most important thing in the world. And so my gut feeling would be that in the beginning, at the very least, they will be inundated with complaints from people who someone said something funny to them in a coffee shop once. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, and targeted complaints. I think there will also be an initial slew of targeted complaints. People who finally think it's their way to get some hate figure that they don't like, somebody like Justin Barrett maybe, or Herman Kelly or something like that. You're out there in the relative fringes of society. I think there'll be people who use the law as a weapon initially as well, and there will definitely be attempts to take test cases against people. So yeah, I think they'll be busy straight off the bat. Who knows? You or me might be a test case either, but there'll definitely be efforts to create what I think, who was it? Was somebody in the French Revolution who coined the phrase "pour encourager les autres," for the encouragement of the others, to try and capstone some people. But anyway, what did you make of the state's other prosecution this week, which is, and I want to preface this by saying that it's a live case before the courts. If you're wondering, can't say that much about it, but I think we can talk in general terms about the fact that a Garda is being prosecuted by the state for apparently dangerous driving after 3 burglars he was chasing in a car took their car onto the motorway, drove in the wrong direction down the motorway, collided with the truck, and all 3 of them died. Garda is now being investigated by the state for potentially dangerous driving in the act of chasing that car. Do you have any general thoughts on that there?
I mean, my general thought is this, but I think this all too often these days, which is surely there's more to this than we think, because there couldn't possibly be just simply this. But so far it looks like that. I mean, listen, sometimes I just think about that. Ireland is just turning into these kind of things. Just create an Ireland of, like the Burger King slogan: "Have it your way." Have it your way that guards won't chase people anymore. Have it your way that we submit to nonsense hate speech law where your granny will go to jail because she called somebody in the local coffee shop the wrong pronoun. Have it your way. Have it your way. Like, I think the guards, these guys were suspected burglars driving the wrong way up the road.
Well, they weren't.
Have it
They
your
were.
way
They
that the
were more
guard.
than. They were more than suspected. They had a rake of previous convictions for burglary. They were being
Okay.
chased on foot of a suspected burglary in this instance. I mean, obviously, I
No.
want to say.
We want to hobble the guards and scare Gardaí away from chasing criminals in case they get prosecuted themselves for dangerous driving. Have it your way. See how
Yeah,
that works out, guys.
that's it. Because I mean, obviously, I take your point, and it's a very good point. There may well be stuff that comes out at trial that we do not yet know. That's I can't
Yeah.
I can't imagine for the life of me what that might be. But let's let the state make its case. Let's see what it comes up with. But all I'd say is that, just speaking personally, were I a Garda, sitting this evening in my patrol car somewhere and was told that there were suspects fleeing in a car, I would probably think twice on foot of what I have read this week, of pursuing them too zealously, for my own.
Yeah.
Yeah, wouldn't you? I mean, just on foot of what's been reported, you would do
Yeah.
that.
And this is the thing. It's the same with everything, John. It's that if this case goes through and there's no new information that changes the like, okay, let's pretend if there's not a piece of information that changes what this looks like, it changes it into something completely different, that the guard acted in a completely reckless way, ending up in some kind of accident. If that doesn't happen and this goes through and this guard is put through a trial for that, well, like all of these things, they change the culture. They send messages out to Gardaí and other people. Never mind criminals. Well, these guys won't chase us anymore. Brilliant. I mean, like, have it your way, guys. Change the culture, change the way Gardaí behave, and then don't be on Twitter and don't be in newspaper writing articles in the newspaper in a couple of years crying about sentencing of criminals or crying about the way things turn out because you asked for it. Have it your way.
Well, related to that, there was a sentencing. There was a sentencing this week in Cork. You may have seen it, where two men had attacked. I think she was 94-year-old woman
Yeah.
on the way back from getting her pension. They robbed her. They took her phone. They took her bag. They dragged her by, I think, the hair along the street for a bit, or dragged her. Maybe the bag was attached to her. They dragged her along the street. She broke her hip. She was confined to her house for years. One of the people who committed that crime committed it while out on a suspended sentence, and they had a couple of hundred previous convictions between them. So I wonder what impact that kind of thing has on Garda morale. Because what is the point? What is the point in arresting people, prosecuting them, investigating the crime, gathering the evidence? They go to court. They go in front of Melanie Greeley or Martin Nolan or another judge, and and you hear that line that goes on the lower end of the scale of an offence, and I take into account the fact that this Gurrier has young kids at home to whom he's setting apparently a great example, and we'll suspend the sentence for 2 years. What does that do to Garda morale? It's
What does it do to Garda morale? He's got young kids at home. But then this week, the guy who has the young kids at home, who takes the kid out and leaves her on the side of the road to punish the mother, he got 3 years. What does that do?
Yeah, I mean, it's
like, what's the point?
It's astonishing. And you know what? This conversation, it reminds me, I overheard a conversation this week along the you and I aren't the only people having these conversations. I overheard a conversation this week at a different table in where somewhere I was having lunch, people having this exact conversation exactly about the case you referenced, about where that sperm donor, I won't call him a father, left his 3-year-old daughter on the side of a road by herself. Side of her, not by the way, the side of a sort of country road, side of a busy main road by herself in the cold of night to punish, in inverted commas, her mother. 3 years in prison. He got
They're down on a night out.
Yeah.
Honestly. He
So
should have been thrown into the cell with a few of her male relatives for good hiding, if you ask me.
Yeah.
Like, he's an abuser. Like, he's devoid of any parental instinct. He should have got 10 years.
More to that, his face should be on posters around the country telling women avoid this man. Should be. That's you're talking about how the society is biased against women earlier on. I mean, that is one thing. I mean, people have a right to a second chance and all the rest of it, but I really do think women have a right to information. And I do think that if you are somebody convicted of a crime like that, or spousal abuse, or any number of 100 other things, there really should be a database somewhere where people can check like previous conviction for the stuff with your photograph. I think it should be there for public safety. And if somebody wants to take a chance on you anyway, well, so be it. But maybe that's very illiberal of me, but I think that's something that should be considered.
Well, I don't think anybody will be spitting their coffee out shock that you're not considering yourself to be a liberal, John.
All right. We wanted to talk a little bit about the other sort of odd story this week, which is the experience of Senator Eileen Flynn.
Yeah.
Senator Flynn was prominent this week because she recounts that she was in a taxi. Correct me if I'm wrong on any of this, Sarah, but she recounts that she was in a taxi, which she wanted to take her to her home, which is apparently at a halting site in Dublin. She's a representative of the traveller community. She's appointed to the Seanad by the Taoiseach to represent the travelling community. And apparently, the taxi driver told her that he was not comfortable driving into the area, into the halting site that she lived in, and wouldn't do it unless, in the end, I think either he or she called the Gardaí, and the taxi driver said, "I'm not going in there if the Gardaí don't stay on the phone." Senator Flynn says this is evidence of anti-traveller racism and bigotry, and has called for yet another one of our patented national conversations about attitudes to travellers on foot of this incident. I'll tell you what my opinion was in a minute, but what was yours first?
Well, my dad always used to slag me and say nobody could say a bad word about a taxi driver to me because my college job was I worked in a taxi company for 5 years, like doing the phones and base control and all that. So I will admit from the outset that I have a soft spot for taxi drivers. Always have, always will. I think it's a hard job. I think there's a lot of abuse, and I just, I don't think it's an easy job at all. I think it's unfortunate that her feelings are hurt by this, but I think it's unfair that no one knows who he is, so he's not allowed to tell any backstory or any experience. And like I said earlier on, any previous experience that might have led him to have concern, but also, like I said earlier on, he's not one of the protected classes of society whose feelings or feelings of discomfort take precedent over everyone else. So that doesn't matter. He's just ignored. Like pretending that there are not people in Ireland who have concerns about entering a halting site because kids might throw stones at their cars. I don't know. I mean, there's parts of Dublin that are nothing to do with travellers that bus drivers have refused to drive through. And nobody, and it's been on the radio, and nobody has called those bus drivers racist. Like they've said, oh, these bus drivers don't want to drive through this area because they've experienced X, Y, and Z. How is this any different? Like, we don't know what happened to this taxi driver. We don't know why you say that, but I think that's worthy of asking. The reality of it is that if you're a taxi driver, and I know this from working in the taxi industry myself, that a broken window or somebody puking in the back or whatever it might be to your car could take you off the road for days and days and days, and nobody's reimbursing you from that loss of earnings. So taxi drivers, for the most part, are naturally, concerned about their cars, concerned about things. And for all we know, this taxi driver had some previous experience. Not everything is all about the victimization of everybody. What about this poor guy? Maybe he's paying massive electricity bills and not making that much money, and his income has gone down, and he was off the road for 2 years in COVID, and somebody puked on his car last week when he was off for 2, and some kids threw stones at his car in a halting site before, and he's a bit concerned about going in. Like, God love him. Maybe that's what's happening. I don't think everything is automatically racist.
Yeah, and look, I'm going to risk breaking the hate speech law before it even passed. I don't care. I mean, this would not be the first halting site in Ireland at which stones, for example, as you mentioned, were thrown at a taxi. Wouldn't be the first halting site in Ireland in which verbal abuse was thrown at people. Wouldn't be the first halting site in Ireland in which, all sorts of unpleasant things happen not only to people within that community, but people who are outsiders who happen to venture in. Wouldn't be the first time that's happened. Wouldn't surprise anybody. You're not allowed to say it. You're not allowed to say that because just like Peter Casey found out, he'd be denounced from the heights for saying it, and you'll be stereotyping and you'll be saying that you're using the worst examples of the traveller communities that demonize all travellers. And of course, then you have to say things which are true. Like, of course, there are many travelers who suffer desperately because of those stereotypes. There are many travelers
Yeah.
who suffer not being allowed into bars, maybe, or hotels, coincidentally giving staff a day off if there's a traveler funeral. All of those sort of things happen, but they don't happen in a vacuum. The discrimination is based not on casual bigotry, but on people's, and I'm going to use a word favored by others, people's lived experience. That is the reality. And I know many in the traveler community find that hard to stomach and they find people saying it offensive. I don't care. I don't care if they find it offensive because it is true. Um, and if that perspective cannot be changed by more sensitivity training and more courses in not being bigoted, it can be changed only by people in this country having over time a different lived experience of their interactions with some members of the traveling community than they have had to date. That's the reality. And I absolutely do not um, begrudge anybody the decision to protect their livelihood over taking what they have learned over the years to be the risk of going into an area like that. That is that, and the senator's casual accusation of racism and bigotry and all the rest of it. As you say, this is a man who has not been given the opportunity to answer for himself. He's been given no ability to speak back. Somewhere in Dublin, presumably, there's a man this week who's been listening to himself be talked about on the radio all week, who's listened to himself be denigrated. Now, he hasn't been named, so he suffers no public consequence, but the private consequence of that man must be struggling considerably with what's been said about it. He'd be a strong man if he was, because I've got a thick skin and I've had things said about me on the radio, and it's not. Some of them stick with you. They do stick with you, and I thought her behaviour. If she thought this man was genuinely behaving in a way that was entirely outside the bound of decency, then there's a taxi regulator to whom she can complain. But to basically use her position as a senator to convict him on the floor of the Oireachtas of all sorts of modern heresy, I thought was an outrageous abuse of her position. And yeah, I just didn't
Yeah, and
find
I think if he's not there to defend himself and he's not there to answer why or where or whatever, it's kind of like, a one person show, like, without any real background. To me, it's not evidence of anything except hurt feelings on one person's part without any context. And I think that people who, like I said, especially for me, taxi drivers get a hard time. But like I said, it's a hard job, and we just don't know the background to that story. And so without that, I think it's just an exercise in one person talking about from a very protected position about their lived experience without uh, any any concept or anybody, the person who it's about being able to defend themselves. So I don't know.
and if he was about to defend himself, I mean, it's one of those ones where it's set up so that he can't win. So
Yeah,
he goes to the media and he says, "I was that taxi driver. Here are my reasons." He can forget any possibility of himself getting a fair hearing. If he
yeah,
says, "I was
yeah,
in a halting site one other time and kids threw a stone and broke the back window of my car and I was out of work for 3 days. I don't want to do that
yeah,
experience again." He'd be accused of stereotyping all travelers, of you know, being bigoted, all that. He can't win. So his best bet actually is to
yeah,
stay silent, because in this country, only one side of various arguments may have a voice and may be listened to. You know what side the journalists will be on. You know that they'd be lining up to. He would risk, there will be people, if he was identified tomorrow, there would be activists on the internet going through his social media, trying to find any off color joke he had ever made. There would be people I'm not going to. They wouldn't. We're not quite as bad as America yet. Where people will be going through his bins looking for stuff, but there would be a coordinated effort to destroy his character immediately if he came out and deigned to speak up for himself. So unfortunately, staying quiet is the smartest thing he can do.
Mm.
Anyway.
I mean, if he was your friend, you would have advised him to keep his mouth shut, put it that way.
Of course. You would have done. Anyway, that I think brings us just about to the end of another week of ranting and raving. But honestly, I do feel like the ranting and raving is kind of justified. Because like my wife today, without outing her, because she's a very private person, but like she was reading the suntan story and she just said, you know, are we living in a country where everyone's gone insane? And it does sometimes feel like that. Which is why I'm kind of glad I'm going on holiday for the next 2 weeks. I'll still do the podcast, but giving up writing and everything for the next 2 weeks because you just kind of need a break. If you were saying to somebody last night, I was having a pint with them, that if you actually let yourself be immersed in this stuff too much, you would kind of go a bit mad. So I think it's important to keep it in some sort of perspective, but at the same time, it's important to speak honestly about what's going on in the country.
But then on the other hand, you'd like to think that, you know, the worm is turning on this, like that, you know, the tan thing is such a blatant overreach of nonsense that, you know, people will begin to just turn off to this kind of shite. But, well, that's maybe me being overly optimistic.
Well,
But I'd like.
The only indication I have is that it is the second most read story on the Irish Times website today. Now, I don't know whether that means there's 2,000 reads, 3,000 3,000 reads, 4,000 reads. But there are a lot of people reading it, and I don't see an awful lot of people commenting positively about it on any forum that I've seen people commenting on it. The
But are they reading it because like they're sending it to their friend and going, haha, look at this nonsense?
I think
or are they reading it?
I think so.
Yeah.
That's what I'm saying. I think an awful lot of the reading of it is, and I'm sure the Irish Times will take the clicks, but I think a lot of the reading of it is, come on.
I mean, like, well, there you go. We both still have some semblance of hope that, you know, not all is lost. The marathon might be lost, but the soul of Ireland is still alive just today.
Well, we hope so. Anyway, we'll leave it there, folks. Thank you very much as ever for listening. Got a very big reaction to last week's show, actually. Was delighted with that. And we are always glad for your ears and putting up with us, even if it's just listening to us venting. So for that and everything else, thanks again. That, my friends, until next week, was the week that really was.